Hi, this is Chris Henderson from Hendyamps, and I am here to introduce and explain the Mosaic Mic Pre. The Mosaic Mic Pre was envisioned to be a combination of tube and or solid-state preamplifiers that I've designed and built in order to maximize versatility in your studio. And so you have 4 channels as seen here, any of which could be tube pre's, any of which could be solid-state MOSFET-based pre's. Any other pre's in the future that I design will be able to be incorporated into this as well on an a la carte as you choose basis. Each channel has a preamplifier. It has a 1-knob EQ. It also has 3 different switches that will cover a variety of different topics. And then we have an optical compressor with a reduction meter. And so I'm going to walk through what the Rembrandt channel is like. These two on this particular one are Rembrandts. These two are MOSFETs. I'll start off with the Rembrandt channel, which is a tube channel running an EF806 into a 12AT7. And then I'll move over to the MOSFET channel, which is the Warhol channel, running a high voltage, it's actually several high voltage MOSFETs. And I will walk through how each of those work. Afterwards, I am going to be running some tracks live through it. So we'll record some drums and some other things, and so you can skip ahead to that if you wish and hear how it sounds with these different instruments running through it. Number 1, the controls. You have the gain is right here. It's just one gain control, and so you want to match it to whatever the clipping level is on your converters, but keep it under that, obviously, unless you want converter clipping, which sometimes is fun. Below that, you're going to have a pad, which is going to give you about a 20 dB drop, and it'll clean up any distortion issues you have if you're overloading the front end of the preamp. Below that, you're going to have a comp style, which is going to change the style of how this compressor here operates. This is the same basic compressor as the smooth version of the compressor on the Pollock. And so it's an optical compressor, but it's very, very fast, and the way that it operates is a bit unusual. It's not like a normal compressor, and we'll get more to that in a second. You got 48 volts below it, and then you get your EQ engage and your EQ knob. It's a single knob tone knob that actually is a little bit more like a tilt knob. So as you turn it to the right, it's going to give you more highs. As you turn it to the left, it's going to give you less highs and more lows and so forth. But the tilt frequency is actually going to shift around a little bit, and the way I designed it is one of the things that mixing engineers and mastering engineers come to find out over the years is that most mixes are going to need to have kind of a demud button engaged, which essentially means somewhere in your between 100 and 250 hertz, you have a buildup of frequencies that really needs to be taken care of. And the best way to do that would be in each one of your tracks, you want to kind of dip it a little bit to compensate for the excessive mud that's built up. Well, this EQ has a nice little way of dropping those frequencies just a little bit, so that if you were to use this preamplifier or the combination of preamplifiers on all of your tracks when you're tracking, then you'll have much less demudding to do, especially if you use the engage of the EQ, because the EQ will be dropping that out a little bit, even if it's just in the straight up level, which is the cleanest level. Anyway, one of those extra little things that I thought would be very, very helpful for a lot of engineers. Okay, so let's go back through. We have the gain here. So I've set my gain for my microphone. I'll bring it down, and then I'll bring it back up, all the way up. It will start clipping my converters on this particular microphone right around here. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. By the way, I'm using an SM, I'm sorry, not an SM, it's a Beta 87A. It's a condenser mic, so I have my 48 volts on, but it's a handheld microphone. All right, so let's go through the EQ. Now, you're going to notice this is a passive EQ. So when I engage the EQ, it's going to drop the overall volume by a significant amount. That's no problem when you drop the volume, but keep in mind, when you flip it back disengaged, it is going to boost your volume. So if you've cranked up your gain to compensate, so let's do it now. Okay, you see how much is dropped? Engaged, disengaged. I'm sorry, I have it backwards. That's engaged. That's disengaged. All right, so the EQ is engaged. I will bring up the volume. Check, 1, 2. All right, so we are now at about the equivalent volume here. If I were to disengage this, it's going to be really loud, so you must keep that in mind. Could I have fixed that with the switching? Yes. However, if I do that, then it's going to mess with the circuitry and it's going to mess with the sound. And I believe in giving people freedom and giving them the ability to do lots of different things with their gear. So I'm trusting you as the user to make sure that you don't blow out your speakers. All right, so now that the EQ is engaged, let's go ahead and start turning this to the right, and you'll see how it really kind of cleans up the lows, but it really boosts the highs a lot. As you turn it to the left, it's going to start doing the exact opposite. Now it gets real dark, which could be really, really fun on a lot of sources that need to be dark. So if it's a real kind of splatty cymbal sound or whatnot, this is an amazing way to tame it. But it's always pivoting around in your lower mids range, kind of cleaning up a lot of the mud. So it's a very, very helpful control. All right, now I'm going to bring the gain down, and I'm going to put the EQ back out. And so here we are again. It's kind of the cleanest version of this particular channel. This is a Rembrandt channel. And then, so I'm going to start using my compressor, and I'm going to go pretty heavy with it. In fact, I'm going to turn it all the way up, and you'll see the gain reduction, which is kind of a general guide for what's happening. And then when I flip this switch, you're going to notice the compressor is going to change its response, and you're actually going to get a very strong de-essing compression to the actual signal itself. And this compressor, the way I built it is I wanted it to be one of those things where you kind of set and forget, and it just kind of lets everything sit right at the top level of what you need, and it just starts sounding like it's not even there when you use it at, moderate to relatively heavy settings. Obviously, you can overdo it, and again, sometimes that's important to do. Sometimes it's not. All right, so I'm going to keep talking, and I'm going to start bringing up the compression. Check 1, 2, test 1, 2. All right, you can see it's starting to engage right here, and you can actually hear it dropping in volume. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, test 1, 2, check 1, 2. All right, so we have a substantial amount of compression happening. Check 1, 2, test 1, 2. And so it's really controlling the signal right here. Check 1, 2, test 1, 2. Now, at max compression, I'm going to go ahead and flip this compressor switch. Check 1, 2, test 1, 2. And you can hear how it's grabbing those highs. Test 1, 2, check 1, 2. Again, I'm at extreme settings so that you can hear it working at full amount. Now, one of the things that's really fun for me to do is actually I'm going to leave that on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go real quiet, and then I'm going to get louder, and you'll see how it's been controlled. All right, so I'm whispering right now, and now I'm talking a little louder and louder, loud. What it does is it controls the volume really, really well. So especially for voiceover work, this is amazing. Singers, if you have it at a moderate setting, it'll really start to control the volume of the voice. Keep it leveled without going overboard, so that you can do some outboard work later on after you've tracked, if you wish. But I found this to be immensely useful in tracking and mixing phases. So this is a fun channel. This is a fun compressor. And now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and plug in the Warhol. So in this particular unit, these are 2 Rembrandts and then 2 Warhols. So I've been using Rembrandt, and I'm going to go ahead and flip over to Warhol so you can hear the solid state version of the Mosaic. All right, so I flipped over to the Warhol. This is one of the Warhol channels right here. And immediately you can see that I'm at a good volume, and you see the difference of where I am here versus where the Rembrandt was. The Rembrandt doesn't have quite as much gain as the Warhol does, mainly because, well, you're dealing with a high-voltage MOSFET topology versus an EF86 into a 12AT7 topology. And so this channel, it has incredible articulation. Not that the Rembrandt doesn't, but this one really specializes in that. This channel, though, given that it has so much gain, it will start to overdrive on really loud sources quicker. So this pad switch is going to be actually quite important for you to be able to get the most out of your microphone. Now, one of the things to know about the pad, or maybe if you're not a geek like me, then you don't care about this, but I do. The pad's not actually using a negative feedback loop. The pad is using a dropping resistor before it leads into the input of the circuit. A lot of pads, they'll use a type of a negative feedback loop to control the input gain. This one does not, because I don't like what it does to the tone. I wanted to keep the raw tone of the MOSFET, and this is the best way to make that happen. So here we are. It's working great. I'm going to go ahead and flip the pad back off. Ooh, got loud. All right, so here we are again. This is the regular signal level going through the MOSFET channel. Now I'm going to go ahead and flip the EQ on, and we have a drop of gain again. So I'm going to pull it back up. Very interactive. And you hear the EQ. Slight different reaction on the EQ but no less useful. It's been kind of tweaked to fit with this particular channel and topology to have the best results. So check, check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2. There we go. So there's our EQ. And now I'm going to switch the EQ back. Actually, I'm just going to leave the EQ on. Check, 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 check. All right, so now we're going to move to our compressor. Test 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2. This compressor grabs a little bit quicker than the Rembrandt compressor does because, again, it has so much gain that's feeding it. And so this compressor, as a result of that, actually has a little bit more of an aggressive style to it, which is a lot of fun. Test, test, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2. That's a massive amount of gain reduction that's happening. And it also gives you just a little bit of grit when you hit it really, really hard. But when you're hitting it not so hard, check, 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 1, 2, it actually sounds great because it'll just level out your signal, and before long you'll even know it if you said it right. Check, 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 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2. Now I'm going to go DS mode. Check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2. Check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2. Sometimes if you'll notice that the input may be a little bit too loud. So let me go back, reset the EQ, and let's put the pad on. All right, so now we have a little bit of a quieter feed. Check, check, 1, 2, and the compressor will respond a little differently with that too. Check, check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. The compressor doesn't engage nearly as quickly because you've dropped the signal before it fed the compressor. So if you're having a problem where the compression is kicking in way too quickly, then you can use that pad in order to help you out with the feeding of the compressor. So I didn't have a lot of room to work with, so I tried to make these knobs and switches as versatile as possible. Check, check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. You can hear it grabbing my highs. Check, check, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. So I get a little bit more range with it.